how the K-shaped economy affects you. Hi, welcome to another podcast. Today we're going to talk a little bit about this relatively new economical term called the K-shaped economy. Now, depending on what financial blogs you read, you may or may not have heard of this before, but I definitely had some comments on this as I am affected by it. So what you have, just to give a little context, what you have here in COVID land, COVID world, is that little pandemic really paused our economy growth. In some situations, it really devastated the economy. In other sectors, depending on where, what industry you're in, it exacerbated growth. And like I'm in IT, so times have been insane for me because a lot of people are doing remote work, and that requires software developers such as myself to work overtime. But in other cases, like restaurant employees, they were let go because there's a lot of service industry jobs where if they're even allowed to open, they're at 25%, 50% capacity. So that is the situation that a lot of people find themselves in, and that's actually indicative of the K-shaped economy, where I'm in IT, I'm in tech. I had to invest time and money to have those skills. So I'm one of the upper class folks, and I'm actually doing better in this economy because of COVID is bringing a demand for intellectual based, skill set based jobs. So I'm actually doing better. However, the people on the bottom where I used to be that aren't able to work or work to the same extent, like business is not as busy as it used to be because people aren't going out. In the restaurant business, I'm going to use that as an example because, like I just mentioned, the efficiency or the amount of business isn't open like it was a year ago. So they're getting poorer. They're doing worse off, and that represents the K. And I'll input a pic of this K economy in the resources section of this blog post. And you can see like the high of the K, or the people who are already wealthy are doing better, but the low of the K are the people who are on the bottom of the economy. Now, what's fascinating I also found is just looking at my portfolio. I have a good chunk of my portfolio because I'm kind of in a pre-retirement investing phase, whereas I'm not going that aggressive. But I do have, I think, less than 10% of my portfolio in tech stocks, really, really aggressive tech. And that 10% is growing exponentially right now. So it's in line with that upward trajectory of the K. But the rest of my funds, which are in bonds and conservative, boring stuff, some of it's broke even. Most of it, it lost a lot of money, and now they're starting to rebound. So I do think that's interesting because the majority of my portfolio has broken even, and those are stocks that 403B, nonprofit stocks. I do the Vanguard fund, and those are what your businesses give you. You don't do any tinkering, and that's interesting because the vast majority of people, teachers that I know, hospital nurses, middle-class folk are in those 403Bs, like my Vanguard fund, and meaning they're not the upper-class individuals, and they're also affected by that downward K, where there isn't growth. So this is an interesting, perplexing situation, and I talked about this before, dividend UBI. And why I think that's relevant to the K economy is if we had a percentage of individuals, especially like if our, let's say, social welfare programs were tied to the upper trajectory, or tied to our economy, not just the upward trajectory, but tied to the economy. If Social Security, as an example, was not tied to the ability of corrupt politicians to save money, but instead tied to something like the stock market, then right now even the poor individuals would be receiving benefits from the growth of the stock market. So an ISA dividend UBI, meaning universal basic income, would be tied to that growth. So that would be one way, and I'm speaking in kind of theoretics here, but that would be one way to give a bailout to individuals that are on the lower trajectory of decay right now. Because whenever there's a big recession, the upper class typically don't do that bad. It's typically the lower class folk that do worse off. The service-oriented jobs, the jobs that don't require college, are the ones that typically go away. So this is an opportunity really to stress the importance of something like a dividend UBI or welfare being tied to the stock market and not a savings account. So that's all I had for you today. Let me know if you got any questions. Have a good one.